Hey, I'm Catiewahwah and you're watching The Record Review. So this week I'm going to be finally reviewing Ultraviolence by Lana Del Rey. I know that a lot of people have been really looking forward to this, and I'm really looking forward to it, so let's get started. First to note, I do not have the normal version of the album. I actually got the Urban Outfitters exclusive LP. This, instead of being a single album, it's actually a double LP. It's got different cover art. It's not that black and white classic cover art that's on the main albums, but instead you have a lovely picture of Lana's knee, and then also some Lana doing some smoking, something. What's also really cool about this version, which I think was sold exclusively through Urban Outfitters, I don't know if it's available anymore, but one of the things that's really cool is a lovely blue colored vinyl, and then there's also a rather beautiful shade of like violet purple. I just love how colored vinyl looks, and that's the one that I've been working with. So just to confirm that this was the standard edition, there aren't any of those bonus tracks on this album. So I'm only going to be reviewing the tracks that are on that standard edition. I wanted to talk to you guys a bit about how I first kind of encountered this album. I remember when I first heard West Coast in April when it was first released. I was kind of obsessed with that track. I was absolutely hypnotized by it, and you know that black and white teaser video they had that was that endless loop of Lana on the beach? So I was very, very excited for this album to come out. Straight away from that first video, I could see that there was this darker edge to Lana now. She's always had that slightly dark side to her, but this was really exploring that. It was as if all the romance and hope that had been so present and important to Born to Die in Paradise had just been completely stripped away to leave this bleakness and darkness of what happens to someone after they have lost a love. And moreover, I felt like the track had been stripped away to the sadness and numbness. I was also really intrigued to hear the immediate influence of Dan Auerbach, who is also of the Black Keys. He has such a trademark style, and he worked with Lana Del Rey on this album, so I was really interested to hear that sort of drumming bass reverberating through the whole track. So obviously I was very excited to hear the whole album, and as a whole it is absolutely fantastic. I don't know what else to say. I think that it's such an interesting album in what Lana Del Rey is doing, in the way that she's playing with our expectations of what she should be doing. If we're following the storyline that Lana Del Rey has been telling us, the romances that featured so prominently in Born to Die and Paradise have ended, and in their wake they've left only devastation. So in Ultraviolence, we see Lana Del Rey singing about this dark spiral that she's fallen into after the end of that relationship. I also found it really interesting that throughout the album she seems to be processing what it was that happened to her during those relationships, as if she's seeing them in a new light now that they're over. And that careful examination is intertwined with this deconstruction of her own rapid rise to stardom. The album actually takes its name from the slang language in A Clockwork Orange, nadsat. So Ultraviolence in nadsat is used to refer to this extreme, horrific violence. For example, when the protagonist Alex and his droogs, aka gang, go out and decide to beat up people, assault people, they break into people's houses. It's that sort of reckless, youthful violence. And in a very dystopian way, it's a sort of violence that is almost violent for its own sake and is supposed to be almost enjoyed. So knowing that Lana is referencing A Clockwork Orange, and specifically the ultraviolence perpetrated by young men, I found it really interesting how she seems to be shifting the perspective here in Ultraviolence to show not that she is going around enjoying committing violence, but that she is the person who the violence has been committed against. So she's almost giving us that victim's perspective. So as I said, Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys worked with Lana Del Rey on this album, and you can absolutely hear his influence. It actually has a similar sound to the Brothers album, and compared to Lana's previous releases, there's more of that hard blues rock influence. I'm talking heavy bass, screaming guitars, and just crashing cymbals. Ultraviolence still has a sonic echo of the musical style of Born to Die and Paradise. Those cinematic flourishes and rising harmonies are beautifully melded into this more guitar-heavy style. Another choice I found fascinating in this album is that Lana is using a very different vocal range from what we've heard before. She uses a soprano, which is gentler, more waif-like and uncertain. This really gives her a sense of vulnerability in her lyrics, particularly in songs like Pretty When You Cry, where it almost sounds like she's sobbing. Now, we know that Lana Del Rey can belt it out when she wants to, so I don't think that it would be fair to say that she's singing in soprano just to experiment. I think she knows her range quite well. Rather, I think that she's clearly adopting this more wavering and weaker style to convey the impact of this ultraviolence on her. This is an intentional effect that she's trying to give us, that she has been weakened. And the visual transformation that Lana Del Rey has undertaken for this album is very interesting as well. It mirrors the change in her musical style in that she too has started to present herself with darker hair, more muted clothes. If we compare that to the way that she presented herself when she was promoting Born to Die in Paradise, it's clear that it's almost as if the colour has been drained from her. As much as I love her experimentation with this new style, I have to admit that my favourite track on the album, musically, is still Old Money. And that's the only song that really retains that piano and strings style of Lana Del Rey's earlier work. But again, the style in that song is really mimicking its subject. Old Money is all about how she still feels like she wants to return to that previous relationship, with lines like, "If you send for me, you know I'll come." The audio nostalgia for her previous records is mirroring the subject matter of her wishing to return to that time when she was singing in that way. As a quick side note, I recently binge-watched American Horror Story, and I think that Ultraviolence would make the perfect soundtrack for it. I don't know if there are any other American Horror Story fans, but don't you think deeper tones, the more bass to it, it's so dark, and yet it still has that romance and that slightly nostalgic look back into the past? It's almost as if they're on the same thematic wavelength. I mean, maybe it's only a matter of time until Lana makes a cameo in American Horror Story. Or, you know, I would just settle to see Evan Peters popping up in one of Lana Del Rey's videos. The changes that Lana Del Rey has made to her musical style really serve her writing, so I think it's really important to examine Ultraviolence from a more thematic perspective. Overall, throughout the album, Lana Del Rey is deconstructing female stereotypes, as well as re-examining just how destructive her previous relationship was. It's as if she can only see it truthfully now that she's distanced herself from it, now that she's out of that relationship. This whole album actually really reminds me of a sequence in the film Persepolis, where the lead, Marjane Satrapi, has this really cool sequence where she is in one of her first relationships and there's this really idyllic romantic montage of the two of them together. But in the story, immediately afterwards, when they end up breaking up, the same montage replays, but all of his faults are exaggerated in a very grotesque and entertaining way, which is kind of what I think is going on in Ultraviolence. The video for West Coast, I think, really highlights this change in perspective. We see shots of Lana's new life in California. She looks very free, hanging out on the beach with these male friends who seem to be a lot closer in age to her than the previous men that we've seen her with in videos. But these are intercut with shots of her sitting in a car with this older man. She's resting her head on his shoulder and looks very dependent upon him. And in fact, those same shots are used in the Shades of Cool video, suggesting that those songs are about the same relationship. It's kind of like we're retreading the ground that was covered in Born to Die and Paradise of those same relationships. So Shades of Cool and Ultraviolence could be about the same man that she was singing about in video games $1 Million Man. Only now she's telling us the things that she might have held back on. It's slightly darker and there's more graphic detail, with even the suggestion of some domestic violence. It's as if she's seeing the whole thing through a new lens. Also, pay close attention to the age of the man in the video for Shades of Cool and for West Coast. He's a lot older than the men who were cast in the videos for Born to Die. But here's a little theory, and go with me on this for a second. But basically, I think that Lana Del Rey is talking about potentially the same man or men in the songs on Ultraviolence as she was on Born to Die. When she was writing about them in Born to Die, she had a more idealized view of them, whereas in Ultraviolence, she's seeing all the flaws. So this man or men that she's talking about could be a few years older than her, but whereas Previously, she's seen him as basically being the same age as her. Now in Ultraviolence, that exact same age gap has just been exaggerated so that the man who's playing him looks to be in his 60s or 70s, really exploiting the subjectivity of Lana Del Rey's own experience, because now she has a very jaded view of it. What I found really interesting about Ultraviolence is that the whole thing seems to be this sort of self-interrogation, introspective examination of what exactly has gone wrong in her life. How she ended up in this situation where she falls so easily into certain types of relationships, and how she ends up playing into these female stereotypes. In some songs, she seems to be taking on the voice of the man and speaking back the words that he said to her. For example, in Cruel World, she sings, "You're crazy for me, you're young, you're wild and free," clearly imitating what was said to her. And in the title song, Ultraviolence, she replays what a man used to call her and tries to figure out why he used to call her those things. Then there are the more playful deconstructions of female stereotypes. The song Brooklyn Baby is a great takedown of Brooklyn hipster culture. Lana talks us through these very hipster stereotypes, singing Lou Reed, collecting jazz records, wearing feathers in her hair, and smoking hydroponic weed. Before she was Lana Del Rey, Elizabeth Grant actually lived in Brooklyn for a while, and I remember reading an interview where she said that she actually felt very disillusioned and disappointed with her experience of Brooklyn. It wasn't quite the bohemian paradise of a Leonard Cohen song. And in the background of that song, even as she's poking fun at hipster stereotypes, there's this bittersweet sadness to it. Because at the heart of it, this girl seems to be singing about constantly being looked over in favor of her boyfriend. She repeats that she's actually cooler than him, and she's the one in the band who's singing while he plays guitar. But because she's a woman, and specifically because she's a very feminine woman, people don't take her seriously. There are lines like, "They say I'm too dumb to see." Because she's female, they just don't think that she can possibly be really appreciating this hipster culture or the nostalgia that a lot of hipster culture is tied up with for what it really is. She's just too dumb. And then a great line, "They judge me like a picture book, by the colors like they forgot to see." Because she's female and she dresses in a very feminine way and she cares about her appearance, people don't see past that. So she says it's almost as if people are forgetting that you need to talk to somebody before you can just start judging them. The exploration of female stereotypes goes a bit darker though in a really cool pairing that she does of two songs, Sad Girl and The Other Woman. Both of these songs examine the female perspectives within a sort of love triangle, and I think it's really important to view them as a thematic pairing, giving both sides of the story. In Sad Girl, Lana Del Rey uses an even higher pitched voice than she uses previously throughout the album. It's childlike. She sings from the perspective of the mistress within the love triangle, and the title Sad Girl really plays with our expectations of that sort of woman. So not only is she sad as in she's unhappy in the situation, but it's also the way that she's seen as being quite pathetic for doing that. She's sad, like what a sad girl. And personally, I found the chorus heartbreaking. When she repeats, "I'm a sad girl, I'm a bad girl," over and over, this repetition as if it's all she's ever been told that she is, and she's internalized that as what she is. As she sings it, it's almost as if her voice is falling prey to that rhythmic repetition, as if you call someone something enough, that's what they'll become. Meanwhile, in The Other Woman, Lana Del Rey dons the mask of the woman who is being cheated on. Let's call her the wife. I just want to say that I was so excited to hear Lana Del Rey's interpretation of this track. I absolutely love the Nina Simone version of The Other Woman, and I think that Jessie Mae Robinson is just a great songwriter. So when I first saw it on the track listing, I knew that Lana Del Rey would be doing something interesting with it. And it's a perfect song choice. The song is written from the perspective of the wife, and she sings about how, unlike the mistress, she doesn't have time to focus on her appearance, and she's unable to be this perfect vision of a woman that her husband might expect. However, by the end of the song, she's comforted when she concludes that the mistress will be alone ultimately because the husband will still choose to remain with his wife. In Lana Del Rey's haunting version, we see that she has finally realized this perspective, and when she sings that final line, "As the years go by, the other woman will spend her life alone, alone, alone," it's almost as if she's realized that that is what will happen. Interestingly, there's also the last words of the album. This pairing is very clever because it shows how both women are not actually that different. They're both insecure about their relationship, and the only perspective that we don't hear, that of the man, is deemed irrelevant. It also challenges the traditional pitting of women against each other, which Lana Del Rey explores further in Fucked My Way to the Top, in which she addresses a really key issue, which is how women are forced to compete with each other for the sexual attention of men if they're hoping to succeed. Of course, the twist in that song is that it's a great bit of parody, because as Lana Del Rey told Complex magazine in an interview, she has slept with a lot of men, but none of them helped her to get a record deal. Although I suspect that one of the reasons why Del Rey wrote that song was as a bit of a hit back at a lot of her critics. I really love the way that Lana Del Rey has also managed to sneak in some satire of her critics on this album. So in Fuck My Way to the Top, she sort of explores this idea that a lot of people seem to have of her, that she's slept with everyone and that's the only reason that she's famous, as if her work itself is not valuable. And then, of course, in Money, Power, Glory, she takes on the persona that a lot of people seem to think that she has, of somebody who's only worried about money and success. The placement of that song within the album, though, makes it clear that it's satire, that she doesn't really mean it, because this song about how all she wants is money is placed within an album which is full of her just laying her soul bare about the emotional impact of her experiences. So clearly, if all she wanted was money, power, glory, there are a lot easier ways to get it. I think in those songs, she's actually exposing a lot of the subconscious misogyny that is present in so much criticism. I don't think it's any coincidence that it's mainly male reviewers and critics who tend to accuse Lana Del Rey of these things, and who tend to assume that Lana Del Rey is not an artist in her own right. And if she was a man singing these exact same songs, would she face the same accusations of being too nostalgic, being derivative? I don't really think so, and I think that, not to be too much like leave Lana alone, but I think that Lana Del Rey is really an example of somebody who gets a lot more criticism because she's a woman. She is a perfect example of somebody purely because she's a woman. She's even a white woman, so she's not even getting most of the criticism she could get, but because she is a woman, she's getting so harshly judged. So, overall, what do I think of it? Well, in case you hadn't guessed, I love this album and I'm gonna give it 5 stars. There's just so much depth to this album, and I think it's one of those albums that's interesting right now, but it's gonna get even more interesting as Lana Del Rey continues to produce music. I'm already really excited for her recently announced next LP, Honeymoon, which is supposed to be coming out later this year. And she said that in Honeymoon she's going to be returning more to the style of Paradise and Born to Die. So I feel like Ultraviolence is going to stand out as a real classic and a really interesting deviation from her usual style. But most importantly, of course, should you get Ultraviolence on vinyl? Yes, you should. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Lana Del Rey's music sounds excellent on vinyl, and this album is referencing so many earlier styles that it just really sounds good on vinyl, especially if you can manage to get the coloured vinyl, because they're really pretty. And I think that the surface noise that you get on the vinyl really adds to the atmosphere of the record. But those were just my thoughts on Ultraviolence. I obviously had to just pick out the things I was interested in, and I'm sure there are a million different ways to think about this album. So be sure to let me know in the comments what you thought of Ultraviolence. Do you completely disagree with me? Is there a completely different way of listening to this album? Let me know. Also, be sure to let me know what you would like me to review next. I have a feeling that people are gonna say Honeymoon, but that's not out yet. So let me know any suggestions, any requests. Next week I'm going to be posting up a collaboration video that I shot over the summer, so we're going to be time traveling. It's a discussion of women in music with one of my very good friends, Brittany. I haven't decided which record to review next, but I am toying with either FK Twigs' LP1 or Ghost Culture. Let me know in the comments what you would prefer, and of course if you'd like to see more of my videos, be sure to subscribe. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye! So one of the things that Lana Del Rey has been accused of is glamorizing drugs within her music.